Hello, everyone. This is Charles Laughlin from BIA Kelsey, and I'm here with another Analyst Roundtable with two of my colleagues, Mike Boland. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Charlie.
And Abid Chaudhry. Hello, Abid. How are
Hey,
you?
folks.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a few topics today. Mike, we're going to hand it over to you. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the app world around Facebook and some of its decisions around apps and what the implications of those are. So, what's that all about?
Yeah, so I'm going to go over what Facebook did last week in its forced migration of app users to the standalone Messenger app, but not really the newsy angle because most people have already kind of picked that apart. What's more notable here is the deeper lesson for anyone building mobile apps, and that builds on a column I did earlier this week. So the thumbnail, for those unfamiliar, is that Facebook made the contentious move to force its iPhone and Android app users to fast switch, as we say, to the Messenger app for all future messaging. And in other words, you can no longer use the internal messaging feature
Mhm.
within the Facebook flagship app. So the downside to that, as you can imagine, is the disjointed experience of bouncing users around to different apps. But the upsides are more engagement. Facebook reports that the Messenger app users respond to messages 20% faster, and they do a lot more multimedia sharing. So this move also notably allows Facebook to give messaging its own sandbox in terms of feature development and other functionality that can better evolve as a standalone app. And that's vital for Facebook in the kind of feature arms race of the messaging wars. It's a real turf battle there. And it's the same reason Facebook paid $19 billion for WhatsApp. And that's a whole different story. But the lesson here really pans back to Facebook's overall app unbundling strategy in having standalone apps where it can develop features and give them room to grow rather than cram them into one main app. And it's done the same with Poke and Messenger and Paper and Slingshot and a growing number. And that bundle versus unbundle question is a big one, and many app developers are facing that same question, including in local. So with IYPs, for example, do you have one main app, or do you peel out singular functionality for standalone apps in use cases such as gas prices? Or a more
Mhm.
recent example is Foursquare in peeling out the check-in functionality for Swarm.
Mhm.
So for power users, they now have to do it within Swarm, but the idea was free up Foursquare proper to become more of a mainstream-friendly local discovery app, and the jury is still out on that outcome. But back to Facebook, one important point is that it's really leading this charge, and everyone that decides to unbundle is pointing to Foursquare for supporting evidence and quoting Mark Zuckerberg about the virtues of unbundling. Rob Wilk from Foursquare did that very thing at our May conference in his keynote about the subject of unbundling Swarm. But the problem with that, and what I keep telling people, is that unbundling isn't necessarily a good idea just because Facebook says so. If you
Mhm.
point to Facebook for evidence, it's actually not a shining example itself of unbundling wins. If you
Mhm.
look at, the apps it's peeled off with, I mentioned Paper and Poke and Messenger and Slingshot,
I don't
they're
think I've
not
used any of
exactly,
those.
what, say that
I
again?
don't think I've used any of those.
Me neither. And the usage metrics support that. They're not exactly a picture of success. So the only off-base Facebook app you could say is unbundling or an unbundling win is Instagram, and that's technically not a spin-off but an acquisition. So
Right.
in closing, we need to be a bit more, experimental, not just blindly following Facebook, to really kind of feel out the quickly changing marketplace about whether users want one app that does many things or several apps that each do kind of one thing and do it well.
Mhm. So, is there a bottom line here for those watching?
Yeah, so I'm personally against unbundling for lots of reasons. The fast switching functionality to bounce you to another app is frankly disjointed, but I do see some logic. I commend Facebook, I guess for one, at the very least, for having the guts to do this kind of band-aid ripping moment in the forced migration towards kind of where they want to get eventually. But regardless of what I think the takeaway here is that I keep saying that Facebook is doing the marketplace a huge favor here. It's volunteering as the lab rat to start to answer this question about what works in bundling versus unbundling and what users want. And, that experiment is further credited by its sample size. Facebook has 1 billion mobile monthly users and 62% of its ad revenue from mobile. So the outcome of anything they do in mobile, not just this kind of unbundling question, will have valuable lessons. So the bottom line is just that. Anyone building apps, become a student of what Facebook's doing, watch carefully, learn from it, and we incidentally are going to be doing just that. So lots more to come as that unfolds. We'll be watching it closely. So I'll stop there. And Charlie, kick it back to you. You've been doing some interesting work with some exclusive interviews over the last week, so I'll let you unpack what that is.
Yeah, I'll be very brief about this because it's something that's a little bit ongoing. But one of the questions we all get, and myself included, get a lot of is, how do you optimize your telesales channel? What are some of the best practices to get the best result out of a telesales organization? Because as we all know, telesales it's a challenging job, often an entry level sales job, high churn, high employee dissatisfaction. There's a lot of challenges in really doing it right, and yet it's an increasingly important element of any sales channel in a local media organization. As the idea of feet on the street becomes increasingly expensive, almost untenably so. In order to reach the SMB marketplace, telesales is increasingly important. So we've been talking to some people. Like I spent an hour today with someone who runs inside sales at a major local pure play media organization, and just having some really interesting conversations about what gets the best result. Because a lot of companies run purely on activity, with somebody walking around with a baseball bat saying, "How many dials have you made today?" If it's not enough, make your dials up or leave at the end of the day and don't come back. Or there's
sales organizations where they have that bat.
Yeah, the bats. I've heard stories about bats. Yep. There's actually have bats out there, not flying around, but in people's hands, maybe flying around too. But and then others are really trying to be more thoughtful about it, saying, is activity as important as quality of activity? Or maybe spend a little more time prepping so you have a more high quality interaction with that customer. And the person I was talking to today, they measure things like, how many appointments are made that are actually kept, or how many contracts have buyer's remorse, where the SMB comes back and says, "I don't really want this. How can I cancel?" Measuring that as opposed to just the raw intake at the front end gives you a better picture of what's actually happening. So the guy I was talking to today is measuring much more against sort of the retention of the sale, or the retention of that appointment, and what are the things that drive to that. And it's not necessarily a volume of activity, but quality of activity. So there's some really interesting debates going on around how to optimize telesales, and we're going to synthesize all these into a report coming up very soon.
Charlie, before you move on, do you feel that it's anything to do with the age of big data and more of an attention paid to looking at data?
Yeah, absolutely. Data is critical to telesales these days. I mean, the cream of the crop are they're using data in a number of ways. They're using data in hiring. They're using data in developing scripts, measuring effectiveness of scripts. This script is, converts at X, and this script converts at Y, and you do all those kinds of measurements.
The Moneyball approach.
Yeah, there's a very Moneyball approach to the real smart people out there running telesales organizations. And so, there's a lot of real interesting stuff. And sort of the churn and burn, stick versus carrot approach, I think, is starting to wane, I think, in favor of a much more thoughtful approach. So anyway, more to come on that, but there's been some really interesting conversations. Abid, you're going to talk a little bit about some big data trends.
Well, yeah, it touches right back to what you guys were talking about. And, one of the things that I wanted to bring to the table today to talk about was a question that a lot of our clients are always asking, which is, it touches right back to what Charlie was talking about, which is this concept of how do we optimize our sales organization using the data that's in front of us. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting and I wanted to talk to you guys about was we're starting to see big data become a lot more of a prominent feature in other parts of the business. And an example that I like to think about is Pro.com. Pro.com is this website that came about maybe about 6 or 7 months ago, and it's actually founded by the former CEO of Dig.com, a guy named Matt Williams. They took about $3.5 million in funding to create a local services marketplace that's really interesting, because what they're doing is going into an area like, say, for example, Burbank, where I'm from, and looking at all the different types of price quotes that might have been taken out for all sorts of home improvement type of projects like house painting or gutter cleaning, etc. And they're putting it into a large database, doing the analysis and figuring out what is the average normal price for that type of service in that area to give the consumer a lot more choice and a lot more freedom of flexibility when it comes to knowing if the quote that they're getting actually makes sense. And the takeaway that I always talk about, and that I've been talking to our clients about lately, is that there's a couple of different ways to think about big data and quote unquote big data. And I always have to put that quote unquote in there, because the concept of big data is almost becoming it's becoming passe, like the concept of Web 2.0.
Solomo and Long Tail.
Exactly, right. And so we always have to make sure that we're telling our clients and the folks that we work with that while you want to take advantage of the ideas that come with big data, one of the most important things that you can do is be open-minded to the ways that big data concepts can really help to sort of optimize and make your business a lot more efficient. And I think that that's something that we're going to continue to see where all that data is now starting to become leveraged to make things a lot more easier for the SMB and for the consumer at the local level. And I think we're going to see a lot more of interesting stuff at that level.
Thanks, Abid. Thanks, Mike. I think we'll put a period at the end of it right there and say thank you to everyone for watching this Analyst Roundtable. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Abid. And to everyone out there, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks.